Welcome to this video for the second submission of the thesis defense for Martin James Moloney. The thesis is entitled Digital Piracy in Indonesia, Students' Articulations of Neutralizations and Rationalizations for Illegal Downloading and Streaming. The video will cover first the introduction, where we recap on what happened in chapters 1 to 3. Before we move on to chapter 4, we discuss the findings and the discussion, and then move on to chapter 5, which is the conclusion and recommendations, before we then receive feedback from the panel and change the thesis accordingly. Welcome to Digital Piracy in Indonesia, Students' Articulations of Neutralizations and Rationalizations for Illegal Downloading and Streaming. Chapter 1 to 3, Recap. This is a study on what students in Indonesia said about their reasons for downloading and streaming rationalizations and neutralizations. Based on Sykes and Matza, 1957, Clockers, 1974, Miner, 1981, and Coleman, 1994. These series were consolidated together by Moore and McMullen, 2004, and this study essentially replicates the above study, but carried out in Indonesia in 2018. The sampling method was purposive, given previous studies' assertions that the most prevalent downloaders of illegal content were college students. The subjects were students at a private international university in the capital, Jakarta. The study is sociocultural and constructivist in its approach, and analyzes qualitative data to answer the research questions. Unlike most criminal acts, digital piracy is condoned within Indonesian society, and the illegal DVD or CD salesman is a staple part of Indonesian urban commercial life. Indonesia has a sharing culture, and gotong royong, or cooperation, is seen as a desirable trait in its people. The study aimed to investigate whether Indonesian students reported any feeling of guilt or criminality due to their actions. The conceptual framework takes Sykes and Matzke's original 5 theories, Clocker's extension theory, Miner's extension theory, Coleman's 3 extension theories, and consolidates them as in Moore and McMullen 2004. The respondents sat through semi-structured interviews, and from these came analysis of the transcripts. From the analysis, we had emerging themes which were important to analyze, and we found out the existence and or the prevalence of neutralizations and rationalizations. Moore and McMullen's 2004 consolidated theories. The first 5, denial of responsibility, denial of injury, denial of a victim, condemnation of the condemners, the appeal to higher authorities, are all by Sykes and Matza. Following that, the ledger technique was by Clockers, the defense of necessity by Miner, the denial of the necessity of the law, the claim that everybody else is doing it, and the claim of entitlement were all by Coleman. The research questions were: Research question 1. Do Indonesian students attempt to rationalize or neutralize their behavior when discussing committing digital piracy? Research question 2 was: Has the prevalence of pirated products and content and the cultural indifference towards the issue inured them into regarding and reporting intellectual property rights abuse as not a crime at all? 23 interviews were conducted, lasting between 13 and 18 minutes. Each respondent was asked 15 questions. These were open-ended questions, and they could answer as much or as little as they wanted. 10 males and 13 females took part in the study. Chapter 4. Rationalizations and neutralizations were indeed used by the respondents. There were 73 utterances across 23 interviews. Denial of the necessity of the law, N equals 14, 61%. Claim of entitlement, N equals 14, 61% again. Denial of injury, N equals 10, 43%. Everyone else is doing it, N equals 9, 39%. Denial of victim, N, 5, 22%. Denial of responsibility, N equals 4, 17%. Thus we can see that neutralizations and rationalizations were being used. While the students were being interviewed, themes emerged from the literature, and it proved illuminating to analyse the content that was not necessarily pertinent to answering the research questions, but provided additional context and cultural evidence. These were not ignored in the transcripts, but rather proved to highlight new issues that supported, contradicted, or paradoxically did both towards laws, morals, and government policy. Emerging themes: immediacy of positive admission response. A surprising theme among the respondents was the candidness with which they admitted to committing a crime. A positive admission was given in 22 out of the 23 interviews. Emerging themes: ease of access to illegal content. Ease of access was mentioned in 19 separate interviews, N equals 23, and 28 times. This ease of access begs the question of why the content is so easy to find if it is of such concern to the content creators. Perhaps content production companies should consider that there could be dedicated roles for content distribution prevention specialists. Emerging themes: blocked by the government. Blocks are merely an annoyance to be overcome. The putative blocks will be sidelined or bypassed using VPNs or other technologies that arise in the case that VPNs are rendered unable to provide access to the desired information. This is in line with Hofstede Insight's description of the high power distance characteristic of Indonesian society. Emerging themes: acceptance of harm to the publisher or artist. Only 3 of the 23 interviews did not acknowledge harm to the publisher or artist. There is a high degree of possibility that this is because the victim is perceived to belong to an outgroup. Hofstede Insights said that Indonesians were a highly collectivist society, and if they are inwardly facing and concerned primarily with their own interests, they may perceive the victim as being from a culture in which they were likely to already be richer. Emerging themes: viruses as a trade-off. Slightly fewer than half of the respondents, 11, stated that viruses were a trade-off for access to illegally downloaded material. As the sites are already hosts for illicit content, it is possible that they could also be sources of viruses or compromising data. Emerging themes: use of VPNs to mask identity or location. VPNs, or virtual private networks, allow computer users to make it look like the computer is in a different physical location or linked to a network outside of Indonesia. This means that they can access blocked websites due to the server not being able to see an Indonesian Internet Protocol or IP address. Indonesia is currently the world's #1 country for VPN usage. Emerging themes: ignorance of the law. The government needs to make it clearer to its citizens what the legal ramifications are for illegal downloading and begin to uphold those laws if it wants the status quo to change. We must not also rule out willful ignorance, whereby some of the respondents may have been playing dumb in the hope of playing an ignorance card. However, having established that there were no stakes involved in the interview, it would seem strange if the respondents invoked ignorance without good reason. Emerging themes: willingness to pay. Only 4 of the respondents described an unwillingness to pay if they could have access to legal content. This should be considered good news in light of the fact that the same respondents were stating an awareness of crime and victim, but were still willing to continue illegal downloading. Chapter 5. Conclusion and recommendations. 22 students out of 23 made 73 utterances that could be interpreted as rationalizations or neutralizations. This demonstrates the prevalence of the articulation of neutralizations and rationalizations. The students did not feel compelled to apologize or downplay their behaviors, which was consistent with a society that treats illegal downloading and streaming as an abstract, otherworldly non-crime. The police do not effectively challenge IPR abuse because society does not deem it a priority issue. due to its own vested interests in the maintenance of the status quo. Indonesia's claim to being a developing country is valid if its institutions continue to develop. It cannot fall back on its developing status as an excuse for lax institutions forever. While it may see the convenience in having cheap DVDs and illegal downloads, this convenience comes at the price of actual societal progress. It can be extrapolated from the responses that Indonesian abuse of IPR is endemic, and whether illegal DVD sales are part of the cause or a symptom of the underlying apathy towards IPR abuse is worth examining further. Thanks for watching my video. Any feedback would be highly appreciated. Thanks. Bye.